So good to meet you in person here, and I'm really excited to chat about all things innovation and about your book. But to kick it off, just let us know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, I'll take a full hour to talk about this now. No, I'm John Rossman. I was an early leader at Amazon, played a key role in launching the marketplace business back in 2002. I left Amazon. In 2014, I released a book called The Amazon Way, which is a book kind of about my time at Amazon and the Amazon leadership principles. I then did a follow on book called Think Like Amazon, which is like the full playbook of all the concepts. And then I recently released a book called Big Bet Leadership. But today I do keynote speaking, I do advisory work, and I write a Substack newsletter called the Digital Leader Newsletter and books every once in a while. So that's what I do.
Great, thank you. So speaking of working backwards and things that you've built up your career, how does the memo-driven working backwards method help de-risk high ambition innovation bets?
Well, at its very simplest level, writing things out is the simplest, fastest, cheapest, most effective way to think things through and to do actual experimentation. People don't think of these memos as like we're experimenting. No, you are actually experimenting if you're doing it right. And so at its very heart, this is the fastest, most agile way of actually thinking things through and testing them out and getting to the heart of the matter in a collaborative manner that takes advantage of the best that everybody can contribute. But as Bright Idea says, allowing the best idea to win, like that's the whole goal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is our mission, letting the best idea win. So I see in the background there, you have your book, Big Bet Leadership. In your book, Big Bet Leadership, you talk about turning ambiguity into clarity. What's the biggest mindset shift leaders need to make to achieve that?
Well, I think the biggest mindset shift is understanding what clarity is. So clarity is both simplicity of thought plus completeness of thought. When you're dealing with complex matters, that is a hard essence, a hard trait to get to. And so that is what we're working for. And so the hardest mindset shift is shifting from this kind of PowerPoint driven, fuzzy, feel good notion of a concept and things like that to getting to the clarity that's necessary on a concept and the work that takes. And that working in memos is the best way to do this. Big Bet Leadership has one appendix, and it's called Why Memos. And it's kind of the research and the background on why writing things out, all the benefits that it has. It makes you happier, it brings creativity. And when you do this as a team back and forth, it's not just the writing, it's the debating that needs to take place that's key to that. And there's something about having concepts on paper flushed out that allows a team to both have hard debate, hard challenging debate, but do it in a respectful manner, right? And everything, right? When somebody's presenting something, it's hard to go at the idea and not have it come across as like a personal critique. But there's something about having it written out in paper that allows all parties to actually contribute to, this concept of being a devil's advocate, right? Like pressure test these things early and often.
Yeah. It's no surprise that we're chatting. I'm doing marketing at Bright Idea, and we do have a memo product. So with that, how do you see Bright Idea's memo product supporting the kind of operational discipline required for big bet initiatives?
Well, like everything, having an integrated tool that helps, prompt people on the work to do, helps them conduct it in an integrated space that makes it easy. It allows you to put all of your effort into the actual value added activities, the job to be done versus all the other friction, and helps make it visible on like there's a life cycle to go through here, and it's that life cycle management that a tool like Bright Idea really helps bring to life.
Yeah. What's a common failure pattern you've seen in enterprise transformation efforts, and How can frameworks like Memo help avoid it?
All right. So, other than talking about myself, this is the one I can talk about for an hour here and everything. But, so first, what's a big bet? So, a big bet is any concept or idea or strategy that has both high potential for having meaningful impact to the business, but it comes packed with dependencies, risks, unknown unknowns, like all these things, right? And so high ambition, lots of debates. These things get called many things within an organization. It gets called a digital transformation, an AI strategy, an innovation program, a new business launch, anything like that. The challenge is kind of multifold in that on one hand, we know that bold moves, non-incremental concepts are needed. That's the only way you actually move the needle in creating competitive advantage. But over 80% of these things fail, and it's even higher than that, right? Because most people consider failure to be like, well, was it on time, on budget? But if you actually do the math of on time, on budget, and on impact, it's 0.5% that initiatives that actually deliver, right? So it's really hard to do these things. But they fail for lots of failure points and everything. I mean, just a few is that we don't really understand the problem. We don't allow the best idea to work. We don't address incentive systems. Well, we say we know it's not a technology project. We approach it like it's primarily a technology project. We don't pull the big risks forward and figure out a clever way to test them. We leave that towards the end, and many, many more reasons, right? That's why we wrote Big Bet Leadership, was to give senior leaders the playbook that they needed to help recognize and solve this pattern of failure that goes on. So our proposal, so Kevin McCaffrey is the co-author. He ran new business incubation at T-Mobile. I was the senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile for 3 years. This was the playbook we ran and where Big Bet Leadership came from. But we believe that there's 3 critical habits that leaders that are systematic about how they pull off successful big bets, right? Like they're the shark at the table. They've got their hand loaded. They do 3 things. They create clarity. We've already talked about that. They maintain velocity. Every organization starts off, with like vim and vigor and commitment and everything. But what happens is these things always quickly just slow down into routine programs and projects. And the third critical habit is they accelerate risk and value, deferring big commitments until we've proven out the critical components, right? Like that's true agility. And so the entire playbook is about how to put those 3 critical habits in place. And if you think about those 3 critical habits as an organization, then you're starting to address the many critical failure points of why the history of innovation programs and transformations and companies maintaining and extending competitive advantage is so poor today.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of summarizing the first part of what you were just talking about, just kind of the old adage, higher the risk, higher the reward, and then having frameworks around that, pulling that out. I see that. Going back to Memo, though, if you were to white label Memo as a big bet execution engine, what would be the essential features to turn that into a leadership tool that would be a success?
It would be the full playbook of Big Bet Leadership, which is, I kind of mentioned the three components of creating clarity, maintaining velocity, accelerate risk and value. I think one of the underplayed aspects that creates great leadership is systematic, repetitive communication, and the ability to create a communication portfolio from the work that you do in these memos is like one of the hidden ways that you gain leverage from the work that you do in these memos. And then you have to do the job of being the chief repeating officer. Repeat, repeat, repeat. You have to know what to be repeating. As I always talk about, you want to avoid empty calories, right? Like, things like we have to change, or we have to do better, or we have to improve the customer experience. Like that actually is harmful communication, because it tells people change is coming, we're doing something, but I'm not actually telling you where we're going, right? And so then Everybody does what we always do, which is we make meaning for ourselves. What's super helpful communication is being very specific about here's the problem we are solving, here's our hypothesis for what the future state is, and here's the agile experimentation-led journey that we're going on. Now you're doing the job of actually helping people understand why we're doing something, what we're doing, what the process is going to be, and we can communicate effectively as leaders. And those are the types of feedback an integrated environment helps teams execute upon.
Yeah, I see that. With your experience at Amazon, how did Amazon's leadership principles influence the way you frame big bets in your book?
Well, so yeah, I wrote a book called The Amazon Way, which is about the Amazon leadership principles. And I think the hidden gem of Amazon's leadership principles is invent and simplify. And it's actually not the invent part of that leadership principle. It's the and simplify piece of that leadership principle that is, for most companies, where true strategic leverage and value can be done. Simplifying processes, procedures, requirements, jobs, cycle times, quality, like that is the hardest work I do in enterprises, is kind of decalcifying all the buildup of why we do things and the many variations. Doing a zero-base redesign of like, what's the input, what's the output, and how do we make the black box of the work that goes on as fast, as efficient, as quality, as measurable as possible. So there's 16 leadership principles. There's a lot of leadership principles. There's wisdom in knowing which ones to use at one point. But the and simplify part of invent and simplify has been one that I continually reflect on and use of like, is this really how we would design something if we were starting from scratch on this, right? And the answer is typically no, and there's value in pursuing what would the zero-base redesign of this be.
Yeah. Changing gears a little bit, we've talked about memo, and again, that's probably how we led to this conversation because Bright Ideas sells a memo product. But we also sell a hackathon product. So I wanted to change gears and just have one question regarding hackathons. They're often seen as a spark of innovation, like a really quick, sprint or spurt of innovation, but they sometimes fail to translate into scaled impact. What would you say, what needs to change in how organizations run and follow up on hackathons to make them a true pipeline for big bets?
Well, in my experience, most innovation programs, and if hackathons are kind of part of that, they suffer from kind of this all hat, no cattle symptom of like, they're here to show that we're innovative, but they're not really put in an environment or put with constraints or put with the decision-making capability that you need in order to actually scale these things. And I think that it's not the innovation program itself, it's the construct that's around it. And by construct, I mean the environment, the policies, the decision-making capability, the sway, the influence of the single leader that leads relative to that. All of those factors have to be addressed. But I think, in particular, what I have seen innovation programs do is pursue high complexity, low value concepts and stuff, right? Which is exactly like if you think of a 4x4 matrix of, from low value to high value, from low risk to high risk. Like the one quadrant you don't want to pursue is the high complexity, low value concepts and everything, right? What you want to pursue is both the incremental innovation ideas. Those are important, but not enough. What you want to pursue is the high value, high risk, and then de-risk those things over to the lower risk, high value quadrant. And that's the goal of big bet leadership. And so I think that's the challenge of hackathons and innovation programs is they don't pursue truly ambitious concepts, because it's like, we've got an afternoon that we're hacking together here and everything, right? Well, of course, they're just going to address simplistic challenges.
Got it. As innovation becomes more central to strategy execution, how do you envision the responsibilities of chief innovation officers evolving from idea generation to driving measurable business outcomes?
Yeah, well, I think to some degree it's kind of addressing that challenge of like, how do you go from pursuing incremental operational effectiveness, like little tiny improvements with short term mindset and short term goals, to ambitious, differentiated concepts and helping an organization have the right mindset, apply the right amount of resources to understand that it's a portfolio game that you are playing, and that in a portfolio game, many things are going to fail, but that's what a portfolio is engineered to do and everything, right? But as most leaders grew up in kind of this operational world where you have success in most things and you're expected to have success in most things, they think every concept should be a winner. And so what you do is you just pursue the low ambition, low risk concepts. And so I think the way an innovation officer's role needs to advance is they need to be seen as the portfolio, an asset manager, a portfolio manager where they manage a specific aspect of a portfolio for an enterprise. And if my thesis is correct, and that's an if, I'll put it out there, right? If my thesis is correct, that is the high value, high risk aspect of that portfolio.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions you want to circle back on and double tap, or do you have any final thoughts regarding this conversation?
Morgan, here's my final thought. And so the title of the book is Big Bet Leadership, Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper-Digital Era. What's the hyper-digital era? So I start off the book with a forecast that this next era is not shaped by AI. It's shaped by three megaforces. The first megaforce is disruptive technologies like AI, but it tends to be the integration of those technologies together that really form the disruption. But the second megaforce is the aging of our workforce and the declining birth rate that we have in our country. And what that megaforce is going to do is it's going to pressure organizations to find productivity models that are distinctly different than today. And the third megaforce is actually the committed spend of the federal government. And between the entitlements and debt, it's projected to be at 75% by 2050. And so that is going to create a force that we have to innovate as a country in order to grow our way out of this deficit. And I think it's those three mega forces tied together with a playbook from aggressive investors who've seen like, okay, we can actually reinvent and create strategic value in hard value chains. And so if you think the past 25 years of digital transformation or digital disruption have been exciting, that's going to pale in comparison to what's coming. That's the hyper-digital era. So organizations have to get good at this game of transformation. You need to be both a world-class operator and a systematic transformation machine. There's very few companies that have done that. I think Amazon is one of those companies who understands they have to be leaning forward on both operational excellence and a portfolio of transformative concepts to create and sustain competitive advantage. And that's what all companies need to do. And you can't wait until you're at a disadvantage to do that. So that would be my final thought of like why I think this is important, both for companies as well as for our society as a whole, because that is what's coming at us.
Great. Thank you. I definitely agree with everything you just said. And it's something that we scratch our heads at Bright Idea as well, wondering how come people aren't jumping on, innovation programs and getting sort of this function built out within their orgs. It's just they're sitting ducks.
Well, I think it's because of a set of human biases why that isn't happening. And the human biases that I think about are short-termism, right? Which is the natural orientation to value short-term gains, even when we know it creates long-term harm. There's incrementalism, which is the natural orientation that once we kind of have something figured out, it's easier to just do little things around the edges versus a fundamental rethink. You've got the innovator's dilemma, which is the paradox framed by Clayton Christensen, which is the concept and the innovation that got us here actually traps us and makes us blind to new competition. And finally, I would say incentive systems. All the incentive systems, from the market to how boards and executive teams are incented, all reinforce this set of short-term, incremental, don't take aggressive risks. But that's actually the most aggressive risk stance that you can take. So I think that's why so many organizations, because it's just a very natural set of human biases that are at play, and you have to interrupt that cycle. And that was really the goal of why we wrote Big Bet Leadership, was to help interrupt those biases and say, like, here is a playbook. But I'm under no false hope here and everything. You know, one of my reviewers for the book, a psychiatrist, he wrote, "Oh, I know who this book is for." He goes, "John, 90% of all people say they want to innovate and they say they want to change, but only 10% are willing to do the hard work to do it and create a belief system on why it's needed." And this book is for that 10%. And I think that is generally what you see relative to this, is like, everybody talks about wanting to do it and they're interested in the concept, but it's hard work, and you have to allocate resources, you have to allocate resources for today for potential gain in the future. And that's a hard thing for humans to buy into.
Definitely. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. That was a really, really fruitful conversation. And how do viewers get in touch with you? Where can we buy your books? What are the next steps here?
Yeah, so Big Bet Leadership is for sale at all your major bookstores. Really nice, approachable book, and a very good audio book. And we have a ton of resources, frameworks, tools, a Big Bet GPT that you can get at bigbetleadership.com. You should read the book, but you get all these tools for free. You can find me on LinkedIn, John Rossman.
Great. Thank you so much. And on the Bright Idea side, we sell a memo product. We sell a hackathon product. Go to brightidea.com, schedule demos, learn more about our products. And again, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Morgan.